Well, it's funny. I used to sort of brag almost to my team that I had no assistant while I was running all my companies, even though many of my colleagues had assistants. And I used to sort of brag about it as a way to sort of keep costs down. I'd be like, look, I don't even have an assistant.
You don't need an assistant. I don't have an
Yeah,
assistant.
you need an assistant, and but I think, but the truth is, I think assistants are awesome. And the only reason I didn't have an assistant when I was running some of these companies, is I had these C-level, I had people that sort of were extensions of me. But when I went off on my own to become, sort of self-employed, I didn't have all these like people around the company to help me with stuff. So strangely, that was when I thought, wow, I really need an assistant.
Welcome back to the Dream Support Podcast. This episode is a conversation with Ryan Begelman, who made millions from multiple exits in multiple companies and is now an executive coach. He coaches some very high-profile people, and I'm sure you'll recognize some of those names. You'll learn about them later. He was recently featured on the podcast MoneyWise. In fact, it came out today, September 10th, 2024, and I'm just excited to share his story with you. He's a former client of ours and a friend, so let's hear his story.
Ryan, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey to this point? Tell us some history.
Well, I think I've lived a pretty colorful life. In a nutshell, probably some of the more interesting or exciting things are that I I worked on Wall Street for a bit in banking and private equity, and then I went on this entrepreneurial adventure where I left sort of this very sort of more certain path financially, and I ended up actually buying into a digital media company called Bisnow and becoming CEO and growing that to over 28 different cities. We covered commercial real estate news and with journalism and hundreds of conferences a year, and eventually sold that to a private equity firm. But along the way, I also co-founded this thing called Summit Series, where we started with just 19 people and a gathering, but it eventually became thousands of mostly entrepreneurs and founders, but also artists, academics, thought leaders of all kinds, gathering in these kind of like epic weekends where we would either buy out like a whole cruise ship and people to an island destination sort of unknown, or we would bring people, a couple thousand people glamping on top of a mountain, or we'd bring people to places like Tulum, Mexico, or now Baja this upcoming winter. And that became this really dynamic community that grew over the years. It's sort of like Ted and Burning Man if they had a baby. Um, and it's a really cool, it's a very, it's a very sort of powerful community of people that are helping each other start companies and nonprofits and just do good work and meet friends. And along the way, my business partners and I acquired the largest ski resort in the U.S. by skiable acreage called Powder Mountain, which is about an hour outside of Salt Lake City, and which was a wild adventure. We bought it in 2012. And just about a year ago, we sold it to the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings. But we developed that in like a year-round community where we built housing and utilities and ran the ski operation and restaurants and sort of a deconstructed hotel and property management. It was one company but had a bunch of companies.
Right.
So I had this sort of kind of wild period for about 12 years where I was running all those things at once with business partners, but really be sort of the CEO to these different ventures. We also at some point raised about a $30 million venture fund and did venture investing and done a bunch of real estate investing. Yeah, this kind of dynamic period entrepreneurially that I thought was probably what I'm better known for. But along the way, I was also really fascinated by spirituality and personal growth, and became really invested in, sort of devoted to various practices and modalities, sort of growing and healing and trying to be, more whole in a way, and sort of brought some of that into the work I was doing too, and the way that I led and built teams. That's sort of my entrepreneurial journey.
You just blasted through some really big things, I think, that you've experienced just because you're like, well, let me tell you sort of the flyover view, which is great. When you talk about, let's go back to Summit for a moment, because everyone that I've met who's a part of the Summit community has a certain amount of energy, empathy, focus, drive. There's sort of something unique about that community. Can you tell me? And there's a book, right, that kind of chronologues the beginnings of the Summit community. Make No Small Plans. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Are you mentioned by name in there, or is it by reference, like inference?
No,
Which one is it?
they mentioned me by name.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a really cool book. Really cool to hear the story and stuff. But what is your role? How do you interact with that community now that you're in the spot that you're in now?
Well, I stepped down from being CEO in 2020, and the company has continued on and done many interesting things since. And so I don't have any more formal role. I'm just like another community member, like anyone else who attends our events. But I still think of myself as sort of a co-founder and just a community that I've loved all this time. But they have a great team and a CEO. And as I mentioned, the Powder Mountain's now doing really interesting things in building. We had started building this sort of museum without walls at Powder Mountain, where we were sort of um, having artists build these large installations that you could sort of ski or hike past. Reed Hastings, who bought the mountain, has put a bunch of money into that and is doing some really cool things, turning the mountain into like a real haven for art and community. So there's a bunch of interesting stuff kind of going on still, but I'm not as involved now.
Right. Right. Now, if we go back even further to the Bisnow days, you guys had a newsletter, which has kind of been a big thing over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years, people building these newsletters that lead to these massive audiences or these other things. Do you think that's still a good road for people to go down? Do you think that's still like a great place to start for people?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think newsletters are really powerful for marketing and for touching base with people. I think email is still like a workhorse, despite how much email we get. I uh, and I think for most people, I think they can just use it as an extension of their brand. But for people who actually want to build a newsletter like media business, I still think there's an opportunity there. We learned that there was riches and niches, and that there's all kinds of niche audiences and niche industries that can be built around different demographics, psychographics, or industries that could be quite lucrative. There's companies like Industry Dive that have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. We sold our company for tens of millions of dollars. And I coach a number of founders of other newsletter companies that do really well. It's still an awesome business opportunity.
Yeah.
Even the media landscape obviously has evolved and become more dynamic in ways.
I was just curious if you felt like still a really great opportunity for people, or if it was maybe, with all the newest email sort of restrictions and being labeled spam, things like that that could be at risk, could put your email at risk.
I mean, it's hilarious. Like in 2012, Google was like updating, I think it broke the inbox into like, marketing,
Mhm.
promotional email, right? And we were very worried about that. And there's been many years that we had many different updates and things. And then we sold our company in 2016. I thought, oh, like this is kind of a peak. And then, I coached the CEO of Morning Brew. I don't think they were even started until 2017, and that company is worth more than Bill,
Yeah,
and is
yeah, yeah.
and is a fantastic company. And Sam Park created the Hustle, and there's all these great media companies that have been founded since and are still doing really well. So yes, I guess there's always of course some new risk around entering the inbox so on, but
Mhm.
I think it still generally works.
Still works. Yeah. Okay. Good. I was just wondering sort of your take on that, but that's good. So let's jump forward a little bit. When you and your partners took on the idea of Powder Mountain, there wasn't really a whole lot developed there yet, was there?
No, this guy, Dr. Kobe, built the first ski lift in Utah, I think in like the early 70s. And he was really the pioneer who founded that mountain and created Powder Mountain. And we didn't come along until 2012 and bought the resort. And it was one of the last, truly private ski resorts. It's not like a lot of resorts are leased from the federal government, like Vail. There was some amount of housing, but for the most, it was largely undeveloped. Except for there was a ski operation there, so there was a ton of land there that had been zoned, and you could build things. And our plan was to build something much smaller than what previous developers were envisioning. We wanted to build a more sustainable, smaller community, and that's sort of what we set out to do. And we spent, as I mentioned, a bunch of years sort of getting that started, and now Reed will take it to the next place.
That's awesome. When you look at sort of the risks that you took along the way, whether it be, sort of getting in front of the right person or getting the right connection or investing your money into, how did you evaluate, was it worth it to take the risk? Were the things that you kind of look back on and you're like, man, I wish I would have done that? Anything like that?
Well, yeah, there's definitely many mistakes that we made. The risk turned out to be, we got very lucky, but in the sense that like, we sold business for much more than we put into it, and I bootstrapped. We bootstrapped our company, so it was really important to me to
Yeah.
avoid as best as possible venture capital and outside investment. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wanted to see if we could bootstrap it. So we really did it in a very thrifty way, where we would often pre-sell things before we launched, like a new newsletter in a new city. We would pre-sell advertising, and we had to essentially we self-funded. And so I started off with a couple 100,000 in savings, and at various points was essentially out of savings and almost missing payroll even at points. But in the end, is now I put in $46,500, and my business partner Elliot put in the same, and we ended up generating about $64 million in distribution. So it was an amazing return on our little bit of capital. And amazingly, we sort of bootstrapped Powder Mountain to in a different way by selling lots to our community members, who then had sort of an opportunity to get their money out of those lots, and it's sort of they'd end up with a free piece of land. So, which is kind of an unusual way to finance a real estate project. In terms of mistakes, I made many mistakes. One of my big mistakes is I didn't invest. When I made a lot of my money in 2016 selling Bisnow, I was sort of cautious about the market. I made the common error of trying to time the market and didn't invest as I wish I would have in the stock, which have now pretty much doubled since then. Um, and I got used to spending too much. I sort of got the hedonic treadmill a bit and let my creep up. So the last couple of years, I've been addressing those issues, like lowering expenses and trying to get smarter about my investing and things that I wish I'd had, maybe like a forum or that could have given me better, that would have checked some of my thinking. I think partially because it worked to my favor in business to be kind of hard headed and like really believe in myself. I
Uh-huh.
had this chip on my shoulder where I didn't trust too much external advice. And I think that sort of hurt me from like 2016 to now. I wish I would have balanced that a little better.
Yeah. The sort of hard-headedness is difficult because when you find success in it, when you feel like, wow, okay, I was right, it's hard to back away from that idea and like you're expressing, accept the opinions and thoughts of outside counsel in your life and in your business decisions. I'm curious to know, now that you're not CEO of anything currently, correct? Other than your own life. You're not overseeing lots of people and what they're doing. You're now advising and coaching other people in their entrepreneurial career, CEO, all those journeys people have. What made you want to switch from
Oh,
leading the thing to advising or coaching the people who are leading the things?
I don't think I would have described it this way at the time, but I think I was pretty burned out, building and running all these things in parallel, and really the managerial and all the risk, and just being up at night thinking about your business all the time. And so I set a goal to see if I could earn $1 million a year working 20 hours a week or less in
Okay.
March of 2020. Yeah, I gave myself like a year to go and figure that out. And I basically want to call as many as 4, 6, 7 entrepreneurs a day, every day, for like 7 months and asked them, how do you do this? How long did it take you to get there? How much do you make? How much do you spend? How many hours does that take you? How many hours did it take you the first 3 years? Because I was basically trying to find an opportunity where I could either buy or build a company that would allow for that. And I was mostly thinking I would buy like a small cash flowing business that could generate like 1 million a year. And maybe it would take me 3 or 4 years to get it to that place. Maybe it was doing half that initially, but I could sort of not have to spend, 60, 70 hours a week like I used to running that company and hopefully spend way less than that. And I met a bunch of people who were doing something kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I really was hoping there was something that was even more like my passion and was more up my alley than a lot of the things I was looking at. And then someone said, "Oh, you sound like this kind of weird spiritual friend of mine. You should talk to him. He does he does this thing called coaching." And so I got on a call with that friend of his, and he told me how coaching works. And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing!" Like, because I love mentoring and I love and I like receiving my therapy and coaching myself. But I never really thought of it as like a career, and I never thought about trading my time for money. I had this big belief around like, oh, you should be making money in your sleep. You should be building assets that can, that are sort of that can compound over time. And so it took sort of a checking of like my sense of self to like try this on. But I tried it and I really loved it. I loved helping people, and I started really investing in the craft. And that gave me a real excuse to go and study all kinds of things that I was always curious about, like psychology and how do you help a person make a decision without just like projecting your own opinions onto them. And so that became sort of an obsession for me. And pretty quickly, I built up a bunch of clients, and it was actually generating like a really good income. And it's not as all consuming as running my own business with lots of employees and stuff. So I'm now 4 years into it. I really enjoy it. I love my clients. I'm really lucky to work with really great people. And it's fascinating to see all the different, I get to see a lot more kinds of companies and industries that I wouldn't normally see. That's been really cool. So yeah, so we'll see if I do it forever. Maybe eventually I'll start another company, but it's really nice doing this, and I really enjoy it. That's all I do now. I do it full time.
It seems like you've gathered tons of information from a lot of founders, entrepreneurs um, that could be valuable for other people. Have you cataloged that in any way? Have you put that into a newsletter? Have you put that into some place where you can share those findings?
I've been extremely lazy about sharing and publishing. I I don't, I really have stuck to this philosophy of not working as much as
Yeah.
not that I've been really spending a lot of time um sort of not doing much. And so I don't So no, I mean a lot of coaches, they blog, they have a newsletter, they tweet. I don't do any of that stuff. I like going on things like this, and like so I have done some podcasting, 'cause I love connecting with people, and I do enjoy it. And I am contemplating like finally trying to put things down on paper, but I do get to share a lot, of course, with my clients,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. It feels to me like me and my clients are swimming it together almost like we're all in a big boat, even though we're running different companies and have very different lives. Like I'm constantly learning one thing that could help the other one, and that I can sort of, without having to share anything confidential, I can kind of help people. That's been really nice, and I feel this like strength that we have together. Where I have a bunch of people I'm paying to help me coach me, and then I'm helping a bunch of people. And it feels like a web, sort of like maybe tribes used to have, which I think
Yeah.
strengthens us all. So I do like that about it.
You describe sort of a community. It sounds like a team. It sounds like a team sport, but individual players. So more like swimming, like you're talking about, rather than you know a baseball or basketball team. So your own race that you're running in your own lane, but then there's other people that you're cheering on as well. And that sounds very powerful. Is there anybody that you coach that doesn't care if you tell people that you're their coach or anything like that? Anybody you could share about?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask. I just went on I didn't go on a podcast for a few years. I just went on one a few weeks ago with Sam Parr from My First Million. He has a new podcast called Money Wise. And so I did ask some of my clients if I could share. And yeah, I mean, I work with Austin Reef from Morning Brew for the last few years, which has been wonderful. And I work with Robbie Bent, who's the founder of this awesome bathhouse company called Othership, which just landed in New York City. Is awesome and is based in Toronto and is now expanding to new cities. And I worked with like, a number of the people at Morning Brew over the years, like Alex Lieberman, who was their co-founder and chairman now, and a bunch of other great people, creators and CEOs of kinds of different businesses. And it's been great. I really enjoy it. And Matt Gray, who you might know, he runs this thing called Founder OS,
Uh-huh.
and he's big on like YouTube and things like that. And I've been working. And really, except for Robbie, I've been working with all those people for now 3 or 4 years, which has been really nice. Um, and yeah, and all kinds of entrepreneurs. Mike McCaffrey used to run this thing called the Block Crypto, which is another media company that covers crypto. And so yeah, it's been awesome. It's been nice because some of these people were even I was just a fan of some of these people,
Right.
and so it's been really cool to get to know them more intimately.
That's that's really awesome. I love the network, and yeah, you've introduced me to several people um, over the years that we've become clients or friendly with, um, and so always appreciate that. And now, well, let's go back a little bit. Like I mentioned in the beginning, a mutual friend connected us because at the time you were looking for an assistant to just help you out with some things. But one of the things that I really appreciate about you as one of our first clients, really, because we had a handful, and then you were kind of the first one that came out of a totally different network. One of the things I appreciate about you is you were asking about our process a lot, and you helped us develop uniquely for you a specific test to look for the assistant for you, which then we sort of edited over time and utilized in different ways, and so really appreciate that part of collaboration with you. But as you were looking for an assistant, what were the cues for you at the time that of why you were looking for an assistant to work with you?
Well, it's funny. I used to sort of brag almost to my team that I had no assistant while I was running all my companies, even though many of my colleagues had assistants. And I used to sort of brag about it as a way to sort of keep costs down. I'd be like, "Look, I don't even have an assistant."
You don't need an assistant. I don't have an
Yeah,
assistant.
you need an assistant, and you're. But I think, yeah, but the truth is, I think assistants are awesome. And the only reason I didn't have an assistant when I was running some of these companies, as I had these C-level, I had people that sort of were extensions of me. But when I went off on my own, to become, sort of self-employed,
Hmm.
I didn't have all these like people around the company to help me with stuff. So strangely, that was when I thought, wow, I really need an assistant. And it was awesome. I ended up getting two assistants through you, both of whom were fantastic. And it was super useful. I think as you probably saw some of the way I used them, like, all kinds of things from helping me run my house to helping me run, anything around travel and my coaching business and scheduling and just we ended up organizing a million things that I didn't have well organized, my passwords and and sort of like a manual for my house and for travel and how to book a flight and what seat I want and sort of just codifying and making everything like really clean anytime I would show up in like a new like a lot of I spend my summers sort of like in different vacation homes. I'd show up and I want to have someone to play tennis with. I want to have someone to walk my dog. I want the house full of groceries, the bedroom wants. So, we came up with sort of like a framework
Hmm.
for doing all these things so I could just show up and everything would be awesome. Um, and so I really appreciated that about working with my, assistants over the last 4 years. Um, and setting up also just my business, like being self-employed, setting up health insurance and bidding that out and bidding out, even getting some of my expenses down and, triple bid various things I was spending money on, like property insurance. And so Yeah, it was super. It's been super useful and enriched my life in a big way. Plus, life is kind of lonely in these modern times, and I think I think in many ways, like the two people you found to work with were almost like maternal figures in my life, and certainly friends who, I got to know their lives, they got to know my lives, I got to know a bit about their families, and vice versa, and it was just really nice to have someone to share with, and be able to call who like really has a lot of context on your life. And it's really just interesting. Like I learned things from them because they live different lives, and it was really nice just learning about like their values and the way they live, the way they live their lives. So I also found that really, especially when I didn't have a company anymore, I don't have the camaraderie of having all these, colleagues anymore. And it's been really nice as like a self-employed coach to have, like a little bit of a team.
Yeah.
Uh, so I really appreciate that about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And one of the things that I think um, makes for a great client is when they're willing to introduce you to other people as well and say, hey, this is the person that I've connected with that's fulfilling this need that I have. So that really helped us out over time. So I'm really glad that we got connected as well, because we learned a ton and continue to learn a ton just by virtue of being associated in some way with your network and learning from other people who are all growing in these ways. So thank you for being a part of that and for being willing to connect us. It's been great. Um, as you kind of enter this next season, you're focused on not spending too much time working, but you are wanting to have sort of a threshold that you want to stay at. Um, and I think you have a couple of spots at least open for coaching at the moment, um, but you don't want to have too many. So uh, if someone was like, "Huh, this guy sounds really interesting. He's been through a lot. He understands a lot of what I'm kind of dealing with by the stories I've heard." What's a way that they could contact you or find you, since you're not tweeting and blogging and your name's not necessarily easily out there all the time?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they can reach me. I have a website, ryanbegelman.com, Begelman. And they can reach me through there. They can also email me, ryan.begelman, at gmail.com. And yeah, I love meeting new people. I'm happy to take a call and explore coaching with anybody who's has a serious interest in it. And yeah, like you mentioned, I'm looking for a few new clients right now. And I've had clients, many of them, like I mentioned, have come for years, but some come for 6 months, and they kind of get what they need and they roll off. And so there's always, I always have to sort of find
Yeah.
new clients here and there. And yeah, and I think I'm in a new season of like wanting to work a little more. So I'd love to find some people. And I just bought I bought a piece of a trail running travel company
Okay.
uh, with a former colleague of mine who is running it. Um, but I help put together, sometimes I do this, I'll put together capital for someone who wants to buy a company, and um, like sort of leverage my own capital and my network, and we'll go in and buy something, and so we'll run it. And so I'm excited. I'll spend a little time on that this next season too.
Sure. That's exciting. Yeah, can you share the name or not yet?
Yes, actually, we're merging. So we originally bought a company called Half Marathons,
Okay.
um, and which is a website that helps people find half marathons. It's got like the calendar of all the half marathons around the country, and I think even maybe outside the country. And now we just bought a company called Rogue, and Rogue is like Rogue Trail Running, and
Hmm.
it's a group travel company for people who want to go like trail running in places like Europe. And so merging those together into one new company, and I think it's really exciting. It's you can check it out online or on YouTube. You can see videos of some of the trips, and so yeah, I love cash flowing companies, and I love finding ways to bootstrap and find clever ways to not have to take on too much, outside capital. And in this case, we used like an SBA loan, uh, along with just capital from a handful of friends, and I think it's awesome. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there to do stuff like that.
That's amazing. it's great to have those opportunities. It's great to have those connections. It's great to have the know-how of seeing something where it's at and going like, I know what to do here. I know how to take it from this to something else. That's a great gift. So I'm glad that you're able to share that with so many people that you're coaching as well and experience it. Well, Ryan, I just really appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and share a little bit about your journey. Would love to continue to have these kind of conversations every once in a while. Maybe an update, a check in, how's road going, those kinds of things. But in the least, what I hope for you is that somebody who comes across this would find your website and say, this guy has what I need, and reach out to you and form a long-standing relationship as well. So thank you so much for your time, Ryan.
Yeah, well, likewise. I love your business, and I really appreciate, the assistance that you found me. It's been super fruitful for me, and I'm sure it could be for many others. And so, anyway, I love what you're doing, and I appreciate our friendship too.